All right, interesting 49ers update on Sam Darnold's salary cap hit. This initially reported by Jason Hurley, who runs 49erscap.com. It's now reflected on Over the Cap, the website. Sam Darnold's salary cap hit is actually $1.2 million higher than initially expected, and I will explain why. It was $3.9 million, and now Sam Darnold is going to count $5.1 million against the cap in 2023. The reason for that is that remember the $7 million in incentive money that Sam Darnold had? It was initially reported or assumed that $7 million was not likely to be earned. Money that's not likely to be earned doesn't count against this year's salary cap. If a player does earn that money, it's billed against the next salary cap in 2024. But it turns out that 1.2 million of that 7 million is in fact likely to be earned. Now, how do they determine likely to be earned versus not likely to be earned? Well, it depends on if Sam Darnold achieved that incentive last year. And that incentive, we now know it, is $300,000 per 49ers win in which Sam Darnold takes at least 25% of the snaps. Darnold started 6 games for Carolina last year. The Panthers won 4 of them. Darnold played at least 25% of the snaps in those 4. So that was 300,000 times 4, 1.2 million. So that particular incentive that's in the 49ers contract, if it were in Darnold's contract last year with the Panthers, it wasn't. But if it were there, he would have earned $1.2 million. So that means that $1.2 million is likely to be earned. The rest of the $7 million is still not likely to be earned. That still would require Sam Darnold to do something that he hasn't done before, or at least didn't do last year in terms of achieving the incentive, and it wouldn't count against the 49ers cap until 2022. So now, it's his 5.1 million total is possible through this. $300,000 per 49ers win with 25% of the snaps. You multiply 300,000 by 17 games. So if the 49ers go 17-0 and Sam Darnold starts the whole season, plays in a quarter of the snaps in all those games, he can earn up to $5.1 million of that incentive. It's worth $5.1 million. So we now have $5.1 million of the $7 million accounted for. The other $1.9 million, it has been reported very vaguely that it was tied up in some playoff numbers. So I'm sure there are some playoff incentives, and maybe there's another regular season incentive in there as well. But we do know that Darnold's cap hit is now $5.1 million, means the 49ers, instead of a $4.2 million in space, have about $3 million in salary cap space. Darnold's contract can still max out at over $11 million as far as the cap hit goes, but at $5.1 million, there's only about $6 million of buffer room now instead of $7 as before. So it's all interesting stuff because the cap hit is slightly bigger than we had initially anticipated for this season, which means even more so that the 49ers are giving Sam Darnold a chance to compete for this job. There'd be $3.5 million of dead money if Darnold didn't make the 53-man roster, because he's got $3.5 million guaranteed this year, including the signing bonus. Another sign that he's very likely to make that 53-man roster. And when you look at the incentives, well, my point with Sam Darnold, when he signed this contract and the $7 million was assumed to be not likely to be earned, I said Darnold wouldn't have signed on with the 49ers unless he thought there was a decent chance he could actually earn those incentives. And it turns out that was correct as well, because 1.2 million of those 7 million, they're actually likely to be earned by the book, and he can earn many more. So this is obviously something to keep an eye out for. We initially were able to measure the 49ers' true interest in bringing Sam Darnold in as a competitor for the quarterback job through the contract. He's got more incentives in this contract than Baker Mayfield has in his with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for example. And again, he doesn't sign on unless he thinks he can achieve some of these incentives. So the 49ers believe in a higher upside for somebody like Darnold than for somebody like Mayfield or some of the other middle tier to lower tier quarterbacks that have signed this offseason. Why do the 49ers believe that? Well, I think the reason is simple. The 49ers are in a position right now where Sam Darnold did play those 6 games at the end of last year with Carolina, and he played them in a system that was really similar to what the 49ers run as far as positionless skill position players, setting up yards after the catch. And Darnold was a top 5 efficiency quarterback. The 49ers believe he's a true contender for their job. number 3 overall pick in 2018. Quarterback uncertainty abounds for the 49ers. So Sam Darnold has as good of a shot as anybody right now because Brock Purdy's still out with that elbow injury, and they're paying him accordingly, and they have structured his contract accordingly with that $300,000 per 49ers win incentive. And that allows us to account for 5.1 million of the 7 million in Darnold incentives. All right. So I have an article that came out today. While I'm on, I'm going to share it with you. Haven't had a chance to make a dedicated video for it yet because I did talk about Javon Kinlaw yesterday and the 49ers defensive line in a dedicated video. But today there's an even more dedicated article. So here we go with our screen share. That's Javon, not to be confused with Javon. Javon Hargrave. And the headline, why the 49ers offseason D-line investment could prompt a return to dominance. 49ers D-line. Why don't we put this here into the chat section? Read about 49ers D-line. Boom. So, yeah, check this out. Why the 49ers offseason D-line investment could prompt a return to dominance. Talk about Javon Hargrave. Talk about this right here. There's a lot of red last year, especially on the interior in the bottom half of this chart. That's what Javon Hargrave is here to fix. Those are the interior defensive linemen, the defensive tackles. Not good pass rushing grades, not good run defense grades. Obviously, Bosa at the top led the way. Hargrave is here to balance things out. And then the other Javon, so Javon and Javon, you don't pronounce it the same, but Javon Kinlaw, we talk about him. We had the video about him yesterday. He's going to be a rotational guy as the 49ers look to have a really strong defensive line. One of my big things that I emphasized in this article is the 49ers have $68.2 million tied up in salary cap space in their defensive line this year. That's second to only the Washington Commanders. And the 49ers are set to reach number 1 in D-line spending by next year because Nick Bosa is going to sign a big extension. And by next year, that front-loaded cap hit is going to increase enough to push the 49ers over the Commanders. And Hargrave's cap hit's going to get bigger. It's only $6.7 million this year. That's going to rise to $15 million in 2024, and then like 25 or 26 million in 2025. So D-line spending only going up. Chris Kocurek always banging the table for more players along that front. He does such a good job developing them. And actually the story, put it back up on the screen. I mean, it starts with John Lynch sharing a really funny story about Chris Kocurek, imitating Chris Kocurek. We got Hargrave, but, and John's like, no, Chris, stop. We've done enough. We've given you the players you need. Go work with them. It was all said in jest. The 49ers treat Chris Kocurek right. They do load him up with those defensive linemen. Although last year they felt they fell off a little bit. Injuries and all whatnot, obviously affected the 49ers D-line. This year, they redoubled down on their commitment. All right. Hope you enjoyed the show. Read about the 49ers D-line. The article is linked in the chat section. Still $1 a month for the Athletics, so go ahead and check that out. And, read into these Sam Darnold incentives for what they are. Likely to be earned, 1.2 million of them. And, that just shows that if he could start, and chances are that he's going to have a, really, really good opportunity to start, just given the way that the 49ers quarterback situation has worked from an injury perspective, but he's also going to compete for this. He can make that extra $300,000 per game, which is really interesting stuff and how the 49ers have structured his deal. They have definitely set themselves up for maximum QB option power. All right, everybody take care. We will see you very soon.